Today I want to talk about a radiator that I've ordered from Alloyworks. They have known to have some really great radiators. I used to do street rods and show cars, and I would actually order from them because the looks of the radiators are really great. The aluminum, they're all aluminum, and they have really nice welds and stuff to them. And when you put them in a tea bucket or any type of street rod where you want to show off the engine compartment, they look great. But upon just looking great, they also work really well. They keep the engines very, very cool. And you can buy different types, some with fans and some without fans. The customer has got a 77 Chevrolet pickup that needs a new radiator in it. It's not leaking or anything, but when you look into the tank, the cross flow, the tubes that actually the coolant flows through is not coming out adequate enough. So I mentioned to him he needed a new radiator, and we talked about one of these because he'd like to get rid of his manual fan that's run by the fan belt and change it over to electric. So we're going to start by opening this up and see what kind of quality radiator we have here. I did want to point out that whenever you get a box with a radiator, and it doesn't matter who you buy it from, but whenever you get a box with a radiator, be sure to look at damages. Like this, it's obviously surface here, and I think there's just a surface damage here. I looked it over, I don't see any type of damage. It looks like it's gone straight through the box, but note the damages to the box, and then when you open it up, look in those areas to make sure that they're your actual radiator or whatever you bought. Always use scissors to cut these straps. You can use a knife, but if you go the wrong way with it, you can actually poke into the product inside the box. So I'll use scissors if I can. The box usually has staples. Just grab them a little bit, pull them up. Tilt it down. As you can see, this is a really nice layout. They make a nice cover for the radiator. It's louvered and vented, and they stagger the fans. Now, depending on how the vehicle runs, as far as temperature wise, I've got a truck that's got a 4-core radiator. This is a 3-core, but I've got one that's 4-core in it. And even though I've got a 190 degree thermostat in there, it won't hardly ever come up an eighth of the gauge. It's running that cool. So with this style radiator, it's going to probably run a whole lot cooler than it did. And eventually I'm going to be putting or installing air conditioning on this guy's truck. And a lot of cars, if you've ever noticed, one fan runs whenever off the temperature sensor of the engine. When the engine gets so hot that the fan will kick on. The other one just sits there. But if you have air conditioning and you click it on, then the fan comes on right away. It starts running. It could be wired up that way, or it could be wired up to where both fans run off the temperature sensor. I haven't got into that part yet, and when we go to install this into the truck, we'll look at that. So these radiators fit different applications. Even though you order for specific application, it has a variety of possibly the same vehicle but different years. Like this has here, I've seen temperature sensors go here, also tubes to go here, depending on how the cooling system's set up. It's got the transmission cooler connections here, overflow tank there. It comes with a real nice billet aluminum radiator cap. We'll take a look at that here in a second. This, of course, it's got your petcock drain. And it's really nice. I like that. All aluminum construction. Everything's just perfectly in line. I've even seen some brass radiators, but the cooling fans and tubes are not that well symmetrical. Just in other words, everything's just spaced together properly and straight. Everything's good and true.
The radiator cap is 19 pounds. This is the heater core return port. It comes with a set screw in it, basically a plug off. If you're not going to use this port, remove the plug, put thread seal on it, and put it back in and tighten it up. Each fan pulls 6.7 amps, so the two of them together will still be less than the 30 amp fuse that comes with the kit. Also, these fans flow at 1730 CFMs.
You can look at what a nice aluminum weld job they did. And you can tell this was hand welded. It wasn't done by a machine, at least I don't think it was. It looks like it was done by hand, which I think I would prefer. But it's very good weld jobs on all of it. This louvered sheet is put together real nice. It's not wrinkled or anything. It's good and flat and pressed out perfect. This, of course, is your transmission cooler. Really nice welds around that. Very high quality. Like I said, I've used these before in every car I've ever put them in, especially the show cars and stuff. Customers are excessively happy the way they look. So I'm sure my customer would love this radiator once it's put in his truck. Now let's take a look down inside the radiator. And for those of you that don't understand what the difference between a 4-core, 2-core, 3-core seat, you've got over there's a side of the tank. There's 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows, and then back to the side of the tank. So that's a 3-core, meaning it has 3 rows of tubing that runs across that flows. And often when a radiator gets rotten, especially the old brass ones with the plastic tanks, they'll leak around here. And this is what's nice about this all aluminum construction. It's not going to come apart and leak. Aluminum doesn't really corrode or come apart as long as you're keeping regular coolant. Unfortunately, tap water, hose water, for most utility companies, the water has all sorts of crap in it. So that kind of water actually leaves contaminants and corrosives in it can corrode your engine block, your radiator, no matter if it's made out of aluminum or what. I mean, if you want to do the job right, go buy a few gallons of distilled water, put in there, and mix with your antifreeze. Also wanted to mention that this little bag came in the box, and this is your coolant temperature sensor. These are the contents. This is a nice little wiring harness. That's for your fuse. And it already comes with a relay. There's your coolant temperature sensor. And it comes with the fuse and it comes with your wire ends. The nice new Alloyworks radiator will be going in this 77 Chevrolet pickup truck. The engine's not that old. It's probably got about 10,000 miles on it since I rebuilt the engine. It still needs some work, and it's going to have body work done to it, and paint work and stuff like that, but the drivetrain is excellent. And the customer wanted to do is get rid of the mechanical fan on the engine and change it over to electric fans. And Alloyworks offers that fantastic radiator with those cooling fans already made onto it, so that's going to fit in here, I think, really, really well. The first thing we got to do is break that petcock open and drain the radiator. Just because you may have to use pliers, sometimes you can. I did mine with my fingers, just turned it counterclockwise, and that opened the petcock up. and a little came out, but then I had to go and loosen the radiator cap and unscrew it and just set it up on top there so it can get some air to flow. I'm going to change those studs, those nuts and the studs. I'm going to change them over to stainless steel Allen bolts. I've got to run and get those. And I'm going to go ahead and take the fan off and the shroud off. And that'll make it easier access to disconnect the transmission cooling lines and everything else. Okay, if you're new to mechanics and you've never pulled a stud out before, and you don't want to tear up these threads in case you want to reuse it, and yeah, you can grab hold of a pair of vice grips, but you can tear the threads up. And there's also stud removing tools, but they also tear the threads up. Remove a stud safely if you want to preserve it. Take your two nuts. Tighten the nuts against each other, and then voila. Now that the antifreeze has been drained out, the next step is going to be remove the hoses. And just point a note, see this hose is getting rusty, or this hose clamp. So anytime you see a rusted hose clamp, don't reuse it. I mean, unless you're just hurting for money or something, don't try to use it, because it's not going to tighten up correctly. Because even the one over there is also rusty, and that's not going to work too well. May not even work too well trying to come apart. So we're going to disconnect the lines, the upper radiator hose, lower radiator hose, and the transmission cooling lines. And I'll have to get some caps to plug them off so it don't sit there and drip transmission fluid forever. And then we'll take off the upper support that holds the radiator in. You see what the rusty clamp did. I'll have to clean that off. It's not good for the rubber. Look at that. Makes it real slick and easy just to get that off. No fuss, no muss. If you can twist it to break it free, helps. Rock it around. Of course, if you're going to be replacing the radiator hose, it's not really going to matter.
If your lines are a little bit rusty like these are, it wouldn't hurt to go ahead and put some penetrating oil on them. You may even have to put a little emery cloth and sand them first, but put some penetrating oil on because they can seize up and twist the line when you're trying to unscrew them.
Now when I'm doing these lines, the transmission cooling lines, I highly recommend using a line wrench. The reason being is the line wrench is hex. And if you use just a regular open-end wrench, you can possibly round off the nut, then you're going to have problems. Once you break it free, then you can use an open-end wrench on it, because it speeds it up a little bit in the process. Once you get your transmission cooling lines loose, go ahead and put some plastic caps on them, or some rubber vacuum plug-off hose, caps. You can buy a little pack of vacuum caps for carburetors and vacuum lines and such if you don't have the caps. Or always look on your new radiator and see if there's any caps. That's what I use to plug off the radiator cooling, or the transmission cooling part on the radiator itself. Now I'm fixing to undo these bolts here, and it'll be time to set the radiator out. grand finale. I keep it turned up this way so nothing pours out. What I did is I took some lacquer thinner, and you can use carburetor cleaner or brake cleaner, just some kind of alcoholic or solvent type mix, but I took that in a little wire brush, a steel wire brush, and just rubbed it lightly and got most of that rust crud off of it. And made sure it's still flexible so the new clamp will do its job. Keep this thing from falling forward right now, I'm just going to put the upper hose on it to hold it in place. Now in the video you saw me take off another upper radiator support. You saw me take off this radiator support, the upper radiator support, and it's designed for a shorter radiator. Now by application, this year truck, being it's a 77, is supposed to have the heavier duty radiator in it. So we had a choice of sending the radiator back because it came in and it was a little bit taller. But instead, the customer and I agree both that we just go back with the heavier duty because he does pulling, hauls a lot of heavy weight stuff, and the truck had been running hot, or run on the hotter side. So they sell this in a black one and they sell it in a chrome one. Everybody's out of the black ones, but so we got it in the chrome. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you can always paint it, and eventually probably will on this one too. But Alloyworks was really nice when I told them that it wasn't going to fit. They asked me what I could do about it, and I told them that I could order this. So they covered the cost for it. So it's a great company. They'll do anything for you to make sure your radiator fits correctly. If you know. So they originally asked me to measure, but I didn't have the truck to make the measurement. And in all honesty, though, I'm glad we didn't because the other radiator is just a little bit smaller. So that might be one reason why it's always ran hot, because the radiator wasn't quite big enough. So I ordered this little upper support, and the big difference is it sits on top of the radiator support instead of bolting down to the side. I'll make sure it's down inside the grommets on the bottom, and it is. And the holes line up real well up here. Just a matter of bolting it down. And I will tell you, these rubber grommets, and I did not order new ones, and I may do it eventually later, but they do go flat and wear out, so it's always a good idea to order new ones whenever you're changing out a radiator with a lot of miles or age. In this case, the engine's newer because it's been rebuilt, but the all the rubber mounting and bushings and stuff on this truck came in 77, so you can imagine. So now that I've made everything, make sure everything fits good, we'll just bolt this in and start hooking up the cooling lines for the transmission and hook up the upper radiator or the lower radiator hose at the bottom. And I replaced the clamps, as you can see, got new ones. Once it gets bolted in, I'm still waiting for a part that'll go and I'll cut the hose and put it in. It's a manifold, and it's designed for the temperature sensor. And I'll just have to run wires down through there and up to the relay when we get to that part. And it's hard to see, but you want to make sure where that weld is sitting in that piece of rubber down on the bottom on both tanks. You want to make sure that your tank doesn't actually sit on the metal of any part of that down there. Because like I said, these rubbers, the mounting rubbers actually can get worn out and don't support the radiator real well. Matter of fact, I think this one up here on top is a little bit worn out. It looked it when I swapped it out from the other one, so I may have to get another one before I can continue. Now, as I mentioned earlier,
was going to talk about if you had, this truck does not have air conditioning. And if it did, and it doesn't have to be done this way. It's just that most newer cars, or cars of today, one fan is wired up for only when the air conditioner, as soon as you turn the air conditioner on. Doesn't matter if the air conditioner works or not, as soon as you turn that on, the fan will come on. And the other one works off the temperature sensor. So wherever you put your temperature sensor at on the vehicle, you plug this in conjunction with the relay. Now, in this case, I'm going to be wiring them together. And you can see one is a blue wire, one is a black wire. Now I'm guessing, common sense, that the blue wire would be the hot and the black would be ground. And that should make the fans blow towards the engine. In other words, you'd be pulling. If you had a piece of paper in the front of the radiator, you'd suck it to it. It'd be blowing this direction. If not, then you'll have to reverse it. So in this case, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to wire these two blue wires together and the two black wires together. And somewhere along the line, pin, make a wiring harness run off over here to the other remaining wiring harness to keep everything looking nice and neat. If you're going to run this one fan separate, it doesn't matter which one, if you're going to run the fan separate for air conditioning, you'd have to have another relay. And when, like on the side for the temperature sensor grounds as soon as it hits to whatever desired temperature, 160, 190, whatever, 200. But if you're going to run the air conditioner separate, what you're going to want to do is run a relay. But in this case, if this was the compressor, as soon as you flip the switch inside the car, it's going to go through the system, the pressure switch on the air conditioner system, but it'll add juice to the compressor. And you'll tap off that hot wire to trigger the relay in order to run power to the blue wire. The ground wire, provided this is the ground wire, it's the right direction, will be grounded to the frame somewhere, or you can run a ground straight to the battery if you feel better about it. But you never want to run your components straight off the engine. In other words, you would not want to run a hot lead from the compressor straight to that. It can blow stuff up. So you always run relays and fuses, because you want your leg, the wire coming from the relay to power this, you want it fused, most likely 30 amps. Now to the cooling temperature sensor. As I mentioned, and it's going to be hard to see over here, but if it's a Chevrolet engine that you've got, the plug is right there. I've actually broke adapter off into the thing. I could not get that plug out for nothing, and I don't want to risk damaging the head. Even though it looks like there's plenty of room, I really can't get the drill with the drill bit size and stuff down in there correctly with this fender well ends. So if you run into that, or maybe both, because like over on this side, it's got the temperature sending unit for the gauge up in the truck, and you may have another sensor. You may both holes may be plugged up, and you may not have one on top of the manifold like I don't here. So if you run into that situation, there is a solution. You're going to cut into this hose. That's why I run my wires up here. You'll see two. One's ground and one's the actual sender wire. Because what happens, the temperature sender, when it gets to the temperature, goes to ground. And what you would do is you cut into this upper radiator hose, probably about right here, and you put this block in place of it. It'll go right in line with it. Now of course I'm going to run the temperature sensor down so that way it's always running in the fluid and the coolant. And if it's a Chevrolet that you're working on putting in, the upper radiator hose is what they call a 1/2 inch or 38 millimeter. So we'll put that in place of it, and then hook our wires up to it, and then that way you have your cooling temperature sensor for the fan. Now I've shown you the wiring. It's where the wires should go to what each wire should go to. But what I want to get across to, another point I wanted to make, is if your sensor's down, which you can't see, but if your sensor's down inside the head,
which I couldn't get this plug out. But if your sensor's down there, you could put your relay right here on the firewall. That might be the best place because the wire length here is pretty close to run down there to the sensor. But this wire is wrong, and you're going to have to modify it to go to ignition. And you want to go to the distributor or coil, or if you want to, you can go inside the cabin and go off the ignition switch. And what it is, you want power whenever you turn the key on, and not accessory. Now, if you turn the key back to where the radio plays, you don't want the fans to come on then. And the only time you want the fans to come on is whenever you're in the ignition turned on mode. Like I said, you can wire this up, run this red wire straight to battery, but your fans are going to run all the time, or rather whenever the temperature sensor grounds. When it gets to that temperature sensor, then the fans will run regardless, and that's not going to do you any good. If the fans are running and the engine isn't, that means the water's not flowing to the radiator to be cooled, so you're really just wasting battery power to run the fans without the engine turning. So you may just want to place your relay somewhere in between where you can get the wires to the sensor, or and still be able to run to the battery. I would recommend just getting you some wire. When you go to hook up the relay, it probably wouldn't hurt to go ahead and get yourself some wire. 16 gauge is fine for the ignition wire, in other words, switchable power to the relay. That's not the source power to the fans or that feeds the fans. That's just what energizes the relay. The other wire that can be 16 gauge is for the actual temperature sensor. It doesn't need to be anything really heavier, because all it does is just trigger that. The relay is low voltage, or rather low current. It's all 12 volts, but it's low current. Then the wire that you're going to actually feed to the fans, you'll probably want to run at least 12 gauge. Each fan, if you're going to run both fans at the same time, each fan draws just under 7 amps, so that's 14 amps. They supply you a 30 amp fuse, and that's plenty. And you could probably back your amperage down on the fuse, but I wouldn't recommend it, because sometimes when these fans kick on, they can draw up to, like, in a pulse, 17 to 20 amps just in a load when it first starts. So the 30 amp, they've allowed for that. I was told by Alloyworks that you have to use the sensor that comes with it, and that's not true. You can run whatever temperature sensor you want. In this case here, it's a 180 degree thermostat. I'm not changing the thermostat out, so I went and ordered a 180 degree temperature switch. So basically, whenever it gets 180 degrees, the fans will kick on, and when it drops down to about 170, the fans will kick off, and that's what you want. It wouldn't even hurt to actually go 185, 190 degrees on the temperature sensor for the fans, because if you get it somewhat matched, the fans are going to seem like they're always running no matter what, if you keep it right around your thermostat degree. This red wire, they intend for it to go to the battery, and then the blue wire is what's going to feed the fan. That's the one I'm saying that needs to be at least 12 gauge. I think it feels heavier than 14, so it's probably 12 gauge. The white wire, if you got to add to it, it only needs to be 16 gauge. And same with this is the black wire, which they tend to be ground, but it's not. This would be your ignition or voltage, your low current voltage. So the white wire and the black wire, in this case here, is what energizes the relay, which actually pulls the magnet down. They have, the way this is wired up, this little fuse, it's fused. In other words, you got battery source, then it fuses on the relay side before it sends power. I don't agree with that. The reason being is, it's better to fuse, let's say put the fuse in between the relay and the fans. The reason being is, if for whatever reason it draws more than the 30 amps, it actually can burn the contacts in the relay first before it actually pops the fuse. So it'd be better to pop the fuse and save the relay. What happens when the relay contacts get burned, sometimes they can weld shut, and then it stays closed, so it'll always run. And you don't want that. So even though this is a nice little setup, little fuse, I would wire it on my own. I mean, they've already supplied the relay and the socket, just rewire it. Okay, I want to talk about the relay. How they have this wiring set up is actually wrong, or at least in America. This right here is constant power. This will come off your battery. It's fused, and it's going to supply the battery power to the fan, which is the blue wire. The blue wire will go to the blue wire on the fan. The white wire is the wire that goes to the sending unit. Now, what they have here is they have the black wire, and they've got this little eye on it, which indicates it's for ground. That's not going to work. This wire needs to be a switchable positive. So in other words, it needs, whenever you turn on the ignition switch, when the switch is in the on position, the car's running, this wire needs to have power. I mean, you can run it to, you could loop it over here to this wire, so it have power, but the problem with that is whenever you turn the ignition switch off, your fans can still run. So you can sit there and run your battery down, the fan's trying to cool a radiator that the water's not flowing through, because it's not going to do a whole lot of good. So you want this on, this black wire is not ground. You want this on a switchable power, switch on a positive, 12 volts plus, switchable. In other words, when you turn your switch on, then you get power. Blue wire feeds the fan, so you run it to the fan. The white wire runs to the sending unit, and the red wire runs from battery power. The white wire, the reason why this has got to be positive is the white wire and the black wire are what causes the relay to close. The relay is normally open, so when it closes, it runs this power to the blue wire. When it's sitting there with no power to it, this is open, there's no power going, this power is not going to this one, they're not connected. The white and black energize the relay. When it does, and what causes it was when the white wire, it connects to the sending unit. The sending unit, the base of it, or the body of the sending unit is grounded. So when it gets to the temperature, let's say 160 degrees or 180 degrees, when it gets there and it switches, it grounds itself to the body of the sending unit, which grounds it. So this has to have power. And that's how you wire these up. Now, as a tip on setting up a cooling fan, in each step that you do, it's a good idea to test it. So I ran the fan wires together. I run that fan and that fan, I ran the wires together. And then I ran them in a conduit or in some wire loom over this way. And then one of them is grounded to this nut here, or this bolt here, wherever all the other ground wires are connected to. So to make sure your connection's good here, and this is actually grounding. Before I ran the positive lead to anywhere else, I touched it to the battery and the fans came on. So that told me that that part's good. Then I used a power junction box. Anyway, I wired the relay and put the relay in here instead of it standing alone on its own. That's because I've already got switchable ignition wire in here for the coil, only for it to run when the switch is on. Now I ran my wires from the engine over, which would be from the temperature sensor. Now, this is the device right here I'm talking about. This is a little block manifold, a little what they call an upper radiator hose adapter for a sending unit. Now I want to turn the sending unit downward. That's why I don't have the clamps on yet. But the reason I'm doing that is that way the water's always sitting on top of the sending unit. They work best when the sending unit's always in flow of water. That's one reason why I didn't run an adapter over to the other sending unit. As I pointed out, this sending unit here is there, and they make a three-way adapter basically. It'll screw into the head, and you screw that sensor in, and screw another sensor in. The only thing is, it's just going to get water to it. It doesn't actually flow. You want flowing water to your sensor for your gauge and for your cooling fan. So anyways, I ran this wire just to the engine ground right here, and I just plugged, before I plug this into the temperature sensor. And remember, the way these work is when it gets hot, then it grounds, it closes, so it connects the outer casing to this terminal here. Outer casing to ground, so basically when you ground it, it works. Now you're hearing the electric fuel pump. Now, as I mentioned, this is the temperature sensor, and it's in this little manifold. That's my ground wire. And before I go and plug this into this sensor to make sure that it's all going to work, I want to make sure that the casing of this sensor is grounded. So I've run my ground wire. It's run to an engine ground back through there, up through the wire loom, but you can run it wherever you want to. The reason why is because the hose doesn't ground. So I want to make sure that casing is grounded. So you make sure your sensor's not closed already, which it's not. Now the reason why I do all these tests as I go along is that way I'm ensuring that all the wiring is correct, has got good connections and stuff, and that way at any point when I'm testing it and it fails, then I know to go back and check there. If you just wire it all up in hopes that it's all going to be great and wonderful, and then you start it up and it never kicks on, is it the relay, is it the wiring, is it a connection, where in the connection, where is it you want? So if you just test it as you go along till you get to the end. Now in the next test is, you know, to finish topping off the antifreeze, start it up, you know, let it get up to operating temperature and see if the fans kick on. But if it doesn't, then that's the sensor itself. But we know that if that wire grounds, which means if the sensor gets hot and closes, the fans are going to kick on. Now you can see the water just starting to come out of the tubes there. That's where the thermostat's just starting to open up. If your radiator's not flowing coolant through it like this, then it's either clogged or your thermostat's stuck. But if you know you got a good thermostat and all that's good, and let's say only you got 1 or 2 tubes out of the 3 that's only flowing coolant out of it, then you got a clogged radiator. So this being brand new, I was going to watch the coolant start flowing out of it before I put the cap on. To give you an idea what it looks like when it starts to flow. It could be also that your, there you go, the fans just getting on. It could be if it doesn't flow very well. It also could be that you have a bad water pump. But I changed the water pump out on this a few months back. That's because the bearing was bad in it. Checking the radiator out, just the cooling system found that the radiator was getting kind of rotted and clogged. The fan just kicked on like it's supposed to. Radiator flowing really good. Said the job well done. Easy peasy. Yes, I got a haircut during this video. I have to get it cut sometimes. It grows like a weed. So I hope you like this video, and hope that it explains on how to change out a radiator and the reasons why. We'll go over a few things. If your radiator, if you open up the radiator cap and you look across the cross tubes, the cooling tubes where the coolant comes out, in other words, it'll come from the upper radiator hose and flow across the radiator. If you're looking at those tubes and the coolant's barely coming out, you either have a sticking thermostat, your water pump is going bad, it's not getting enough pressure, or your radiator is possibly clogged. In this particular incident, I changed the thermostat and the water pump some time back, and it ran cooler than it did, but it still was running a little on the hot side. So looking at the radiator, I noticed it wasn't flowing correctly. So the radiator was 15 years old, 20 years old, so it was probably time to change it anyways. Maybe older than that. But then I put in this Alloyworks brand radiator, which a very good radiator. It fit really well. In this particular case, when I ordered the radiator, it was for that particular model pickup truck, and which was bigger. The radiator had in it was smaller, but I know the history of this truck because I helped put it together some time back. from like 1990. It was pieces and patches. Matter of fact, we call it the truck patch. But the radiator support is not the radiator support that was in it. It was actually out of another truck, I think a 6-cylinder pickup truck, which took a smaller radiator. But we got the all the stuff to put the fan shroud and everything on it for the 6-cylinder, which still worked for the V8, but it did put the smaller radiator in it. So now it's back to having the larger one for heavier duty. The truck is used for pulling and hauling great weight, so this will work out really well for it. And this radiator came in with cooling fans on it, or electric cooling fans, and the customer wanted to change it over from a regular mechanical fan that ran with a belt over electric fans. So you've seen all the processes and what I went through to get through it. So I'll list down in the description all the things I did, part numbers, where you can get some of the stuff, and definitely get the radiator. And if you have any questions, just leave me a comment. I'll always answer, usually within 24 hours. You'll see my website link down in the description. Please contact me through there. You can send me pictures. I don't charge. And I can't think of anything else, but if you do, please let me know. And I hope, like I said, hope you liked the video. And if you did, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.